This is Dr. Mariah White, host of Your Life Matters. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello everybody, it is No Filter Friday on Public House Media, and I am sitting here with my old friend from a million years ago who is now a sex therapist. Do you remember we did a photo shoot for IGN?
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
A billion
A different time.
It was a different time. It was definitely a different time. Those pictures still survive though. Like they're still
good
out.
pictures.
They are. They're
very nice. Yeah.
They're still in Google to this day.
Yeah, but that's, we were just talking about that's like the pre-social media. It was a different time.
It was.
At that time. I'm really glad that we were able to do that at this time. That time back then, where now it's just a different world with those types of things. But that was a really fun shoot.
It was. Yeah. It was a great. That was the only time I've ever seen a scorpion in LA.
Oh, there was a scorpion at the house?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There was a dead one and a bee was eating it.
Oh wow. Huh.
A weird thing to remember, but that shoot was kind of interesting though, because I think my friend called me like months later. He's like, "Oh, you were in G4 TV today." I was like, "No, I've never worked with them." And he was like, "No, you're on it today."
There's a lot of connection with the IGN and the video game industry and like kind of nerd culture, because I did some other stuff in that kind of geek nerd culture video game world back then, where they were kind of collaborating with like sexy girls, but also nerd culture. And I actually heard recently, this is interesting, I don't know if you know anything about this, that some of the like geek nerd tech conventions have stopped using booth babes.
Why?
This is just something somebody told me the other day, and I was thinking that's really interesting, because they were really pushing like sexuality in girls, and it became more about that and taking pictures with sexy girls than the technology. And I don't actually know anything besides what a friend of mine told me that is in the video game tech industry, but it's an interesting concept to think, well, what was the purpose of that? And, we worked jobs like that a decade ago or whatever, and I was happy to get the checks that put me through school, but looking at the culture of that and what are we really promoting and what message are we really saying is really interesting.
Total. I heard something similar about like the National Dart League or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like the televised dart championships, or I don't know what they are, but there was like this whole like outcry of like, we need to get rid of the dart girls. How it's sexist. How dare them do this? And then everybody's like, we miss them.
It's an interesting conversation though, because coming from a place where we both worked jobs like that, and I'm very sex positive, I'm very feminist, so I was happy to take those jobs.
Yeah, we had a blast doing that stuff.
I exploited myself left and right, as a lot of us do, in the LA culture. You know, if I could take something, I've talked about this, I've been a sexy clown for a job. I've been, you name it, I've done it. And I had no problem with that, and I think that with people knowing that this is all just fun, and it's marketing, and it's promotions, and it's sales, and it's all these things that go into a culture that's really monetized by bigger companies and about pushing a product, if you understand and know that, I think that's fine. But I think the problem becomes when people don't understand it's a fantasy, or that's part of something marketing related for a company, and they do objectify a woman, or they do misconstrue what that is in that moment.
For sure. Yeah. It's like, you're paid to be here. I'm not talking to you because it's good for my health. But at the same time though, like I had such a good time, and like I'm a trade show convention nerd, dude, and I've parlayed that into like other jobs, like big jobs.
And a lot of girls I know that worked those jobs back then did, you get in and you're doing booth babe job, and then you start doing some sales. I had a company I worked with 10, 15 years ago. I modeled for them, and then they had me at their trade shows, and I was helping them with sales and setting up the booth and helping them with like general marketing. Yeah. And so I was doing sales and marketing, and I transitioned out of being a model for them, and those are skills that I was able to utilize in other jobs that I had worked. So
for sure,
a lot of people that are in those positions end up collaborating with these companies, gaining more skills with whatever company it is they're working with, and moving up. And having corporate jobs.
Definitely. Well, speaking of like specifically like gaming booth babe stuff, like I worked on the launch of the Nintendo Wii U gamepad at E3, which is a monstrous show, and I got to work with Mr. Miyamoto. Like he walked in onto the trade show floor one morning really early, and I said all of 2 words to him in Japanese. He's like, "We're keeping her." And I got to
Wait,
go.
you speak Japanese?
No, I don't. I just happen to know 3 words from the 2 years that I spent working there when I should have known Japanese, but I certainly don't. And I said all of 2 words to him. He was like, "She comes with us." And I got to go work on like the executive floor with him that I then talked about in other nerd magazines. But like, I wouldn't have been able to do that under really any other circumstances. Like, I don't actually work in gaming. Like, that's not my bag. So yeah, I think it comes from a different point, like when you've actually done those jobs for sure. But this is weird. I did another podcast this morning and they were asking me about how like you coexist in these like quote unquote sexy spaces and like work, like regular work, or like stuff that's like more meaningful, as they say. And I'm like, I don't think of it as like parts of my personality. Like it's just facets that make up one diamond. You know what I mean?
Everything as being partially exploitative or dependent on money or creating a product. So of course those jobs we did, it's pretty blatant that those things are like that. But I even talk to people that work in television, documentaries. Well, there's still an exploitative aspect of everything that we do that's related to entertainment, or where your photo's taken on something, or there's a company behind something. That how is that also not exploitative
in
that way? Right. And also to the other side of it, when, people say that, whether it's being a model or being a performer, a dancer, or doing these things, is just aesthetic, or it's very vapid or shallow. I actually have developed extremely meaningful relationships with the people that I've met in that period of time in my life. And maybe they're still doing those things. Maybe they've moved on and they're mothers, they've gone to school, they have a different career, maybe, who knows? Yeah. But those relationships, because the women that I had worked with knew how to, we can call it, the casual term would be like hustle. Yeah. They were working 7 days a week, 2-3 gigs a day, driving, 30,000 miles a year on their cars to go to all these jobs, and micromanaging every little payment that comes through, and the skill in that and the passion in that to be able to have that creative freedom, but also be able to support yourself. Yeah. I find really admirable. So those jobs and what those people got out of them, maybe it wasn't, feeding the homeless in that moment, but the meaningful relationships that are made and the experience that are had are actually, I think, very meaningful. So, you can look at both sides of everything, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting to be how, people are like, oh, but you also do that? Like, that's so weird.
We said that before we turned the mics on when I just said I've been in my private practice now for about 7 years. And, 7 years in my practice, and I saw patients 2-3 years before that while I was finishing up hours for my license. So I worked at sliding scale clinics or with court mandated clients. So I've seen clients for, let's say, about 9 years at this point. But in the beginning, I wasn't licensed, so I didn't make any money. Yeah. So I had to do these other jobs. Yeah. So in the world where I was working with performers and professional dancers and modeling and conventions, when I said, I'm actually finishing up my hours, I have my master's degree, I'm going to do my PhD, people actually got uncomfortable, whether it was a jealousy or they were intimidated or they were just confused. Like, what is it? I can't put you in a box. I feel uncomfortable.
How heaven forbid you can't be boxed.
Right.
Heaven forbid.
Like short circuiting, like my brain can't compute this. Or then when I was in my more academic world and I'm in school and I went to Pepperdine, it was a more conservative school, and a lot of the people I went to graduate school with had the privilege and luxury of not working while they went to school for their masters. That wasn't my situation. So when I had mentioned, after class tonight at 10 p.m., I'm going to go work at a nightclub until 2 a.m., sleep 5 hours, and then get up and do my other job, they'd look at me confused and think that, are you making bad decisions, or are you, what worlds are you in? And I'm like, hey, I just need to make that $200 so I can keep paying my rent, so I can go to school. So I actually felt like I was living these two identities and keeping both separate. So I think some might think, well, maybe you wouldn't talk about those sexy jobs or the modeling jobs around your more academic professional world, but I also didn't feel I could be open about my academic life in the more entertainment space as well. So, I
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
And that's an experience a lot of women have. So I think this is more blatant and obvious. It's go-go dancing and modeling compared to, getting a PhD. But how many women out there also experience flavors of that in other parts of their lives.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like how you can't do this, but you can do that.
You can't be a working mother.
Yeah.
I see women in my practice that have that get criticized for working full time but being a mother.
You know what? Not that I'm like trying to have kids or anything, but like I can't imagine. And like people that want to stay at home and be moms, like that's cool. Knock yourself out. But like I can't imagine stopping whatever crunching goes on in my mind. I can't imagine stopping it. I think I'd die.
Yeah.
I don't think I could physically do it and just be like, oh, I'm just going to take care of this kid and that's going to be my whole focus. Like, I don't think I'm
And for some people that's very fulfilling, but, having multiple identities, is an interesting way to live, and also what these cultures are a part of, how they accept or don't accept these other parts of you.
Totally. Yeah. It's a bizarre world that we live in. But anyway, so you've been practicing for 7 years. Do you see like entertainment people like in your practice?
Sure. Yeah. My office is in West Hollywood and I'm in private practice. So it's really interesting the type of clients that I see, because a lot of people find me through either referrals for my specialty working as a sex therapist, but a lot of people also find me by zip code. So if you're looking like
90069.
Right. 90046. 46, yeah.
46?
46 is my work zip. We have the same home zip, so yeah, it's a different one. But yeah, when you look that up, because I'm in West Hollywood and I'm on Santa Monica Boulevard, a lot of therapists there are actually gay men. There's more gay male therapists there than, let's say, in the Valley.
There. Yeah.
Right, there'd be more female therapists. So if you're a woman or somebody that's looking for a female therapist who, looks younger-ish, and when I say younger-ish, like, let's say under 50.
Yeah.
I'm going to be one of the first ones that come up. So I think because of that, I get a lot of skewing a little bit younger clients that want somebody that feel more relatable. I see many clients that either are in the entertainment industry, whether they are actor, model, one of those types of categories, or they're behind the scenes, production, director, writer. I also see a lot of people that come from privilege. West Hollywood is very expensive.
It's extremely expensive.
So to be young and live there, a lot of times people come from privilege to be able to exist in that world. So I see a lot of clients who their family dynamics are related to privilege or having a very successful family member, maybe a famous family member. So maybe my whole practice isn't full of like Brad Pitts, but maybe, Brad Pitt's cousin, or, and how that changes the family dynamic and the life in Los Angeles and whatever career they're in.
Totally.
So it's really interesting to see the demographic of people that come to my office because of where I'm located and my specialty. Yeah.
How did you arrive at wanting to be a sex therapist?
Well, who wouldn't want to be a sex therapist? I mean, I have the coolest job ever. I was always interested in like feminist psychology. So, there's a lot of overlap between gender studies, women's studies, feminist psychology, and sexuality. I mean, they really just overlap on our freedoms and abilities to be who we are and be our authentic selves as women. So I think that even as a adolescent, I was really interested in those studies. Actually, today, Elizabeth Wurtzel passed away. She was the author of Prozac Nation.
Yeah, that was a big trending topic this morning.
Yeah, it's a really big book. That book really affected me, but I mean, what year did that come out? 94, 95? I was 13, 14 years old. That was a really impactful book for me. So how we as women navigate the world, being sexual figures, having our own depressions and anxieties, how culture affects us. So that transitioned more into overall just interest in sexuality and the lack of therapists that even understand anything. In our master's program, we have 1 unit of sexuality education, and that is not enough to go beyond, how married couples are intimate. The textbook for the sexuality class at my college that was a very well-known master's program for therapists
is expensive.
Passionate Marriage. Like, what if you want to have sex outside of a marriage? Like, so if this is the textbook, then what is that telling these students that maybe come from a more conservative background? It's a more expensive school. The demographic of people that might be attracted to the Pepperdine program might not be the more liberal, feminist-minded people just because of the school. You know? So then you have all these therapists released out into the world that really just don't have a background or the ability, the training to work with a client that's a sex worker or a client that is bisexual and is exploring what that means for their monogamous relationship. So the things that are very common issues that people are shameful to talk about most therapists just aren't equipped unless they've sought out additional training or expertise.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I know you've interviewed Nicoletta before.
Yeah.
She's
we talked about that, like one unit, right?
And there's very few schools that provide additional education specifically in sexuality, and she picked one of them and is finishing up her PhD right now at Widener University, which is one of the few, but that's in Philadelphia. Yeah. My hometown. But I'm like, I wish I did that one because I could go back home and hang out with my family. But, there's very few schools and with curriculums that do anything extra. So you really have to seek out a community of sex therapists and join organizations, associations, writing, being involved in these things. So it takes a lot extra energy than just taking like a class in trauma.
Yeah, just getting your degree and doing your hours.
Right, doing continuing education credits or something like that. So very quickly, because of my expertise and my background, I then became the person that went into Pepperdine and was doing in-services with their therapist students because of my background. So, within a year or two after graduation, I was teaching their students about sex therapy and about the clients that could come in and be interested in that type of work. So very quickly, I was validated a lot for my background, which I think is great, but that's part of the problem is we don't have enough of that. So there's more of it happening now, but yeah.
It's not. It's definitely a rare thing though. Mm-hmm. It's not just a run of the mill.
I finalized today. I'm starting the first sex worker process group, therapy group. There's none that exist in LA. None, zero. And this
Which is wild because Sepulveda.
Right. Well, that's a different type of sex worker. There's a nonprofit I work with called Pineapple Support. Nicoletta also works with Pineapple Support, and they subsidize mental health services for performers in the adult industry. Mm-hmm. But now with OnlyFans and webcam and all these things, most people that do a type of like sex work, like escorting or stripping, are also doing on-camera things because you can just be your own boss. Why would you not do that? Take advantage of these opportunities. So most people are considered adult performers because they do things on camera in addition to maybe off camera. So I'm starting that in February, and hopefully it'll be a quarterly thing where I'll do 8 weeks where it's the same people that come in and just kind of get support from other people in that industry, because why do we not have something like this? Because we have so many people that work in that industry in this town.
Tons. So, the whole valley.
The valley. Now it's everywhere because you can be. Well, that's a very old school way to think, because that was when porn was like filmed, right? Yeah. That's when there were, Vivid doesn't even do porn anymore. That's when Vivid was filming. They were like high-end porn. They'd rent out mansions in the valley or these houses. Yeah. And you drive down the street. Little do you know, there's like gangbangs happening, and like behind every cute little closed cottage-looking door. But now, because of the change in the industry, where people are their own bosses, just like you're able to do a podcast like wherever you want.
Wherever you feel like it. Yeah.
You can also do porn wherever you want. You can film things with your phone and upload them to webcam sites. You can make clips with, literally your camera phone and sell them online. And if you have a following, make money and be your own boss.
Well, the girl sold her pictures for Australia fires.
That went viral. Her accounts all got shut down, but she's now famous. Yeah. She knew what she was doing. Yeah. So not only was she working for a good cause, but she knows PR.
Koalas, yeah.
Yeah, really. But it's interesting because that story got so sensationalized. I've seen it all over the place. Yeah. Right? People are screenshotting it, putting it on Instagram, Facebook. It's on Apple News, the whole thing.
It's hilarious.
But every article actually says something different. She made $100,000 for Australia. She made $75,000. She made $10,000. Wait, how much money did this girl make?
Doesn't matter.
Is she even a real person? Like, what is this? It's so sensationalized. Because not only that she would do this, which, good for her. If you're going to do that anyway, might as well make some money for charity. I think I'm going to shake her hand. But that her accounts got shut down because of the SESTA-FOSTA laws, which restrict sex workers and how they present themselves. And what that does in turn is it ends up putting people in the closet and hiding them, but these things are still going on.
Yeah, they still happen.
So this girl is still going to be doing nudes for money. Do you want her doing nudes for money in a way that is donating to charity? She's not violating anyone. She's not accessing children with her nudes. It's all consensual and, adult behavior. So do you want to hide that and still have it go on and have it be more shady and dangerous? Or do you want to make it okay to talk about in public?
Yeah, well, they cover for pedophiles. They cover for kiddie porn producers. Like, they'll shut this girl down, but we've got...
Right, look at the culture in Hollywood. So, there's obviously some pretty big cultural issues that people would be so offended that somebody's showing a nipple and donating money. I think I think what this girl did was really cool. I think she used her popularity and what she was already doing.
She harnessed the power, what she was already doing.
Right. Yeah.
I have a question for you, though. Okay, so this is a little off the beaten path, but I want to know what you think about it. So there is that whole thing of girls on Instagram are like selling nudes as texts and stuff like that. Is that, I have a theory on this, so let me know if I'm right or not, but is it like something like the guys are pretending like this girl is like texting them for free? Is that the...
No matter what, it's validating. I mean, when you get a lap dance at a strip club, you know you're paying for the lap dance, but in your mind, this is your hot girlfriend or your one-night stand that's doing this just for you.
Yeah.
So, as much as we know that's just a fantasy, I've talked to many men that think, man, that stripper really liked me. You paid her $40. It was 2 minutes.
And then she left.
And then she forgot you existed. Yeah. Because that's her job, and that's just what she's doing. So... as much as I want to believe that people know that this is all a fantasy, a lot of people really don't. And it plays into the idea of loneliness and the need for validation from beautiful women. But I also don't think it's a problem unless it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Hey, and all the guys that are listening to this podcast, what you need to know is most of the time who's texting you these photos or these messages from this hot babe, it's probably not the hot babe. I have friends that do this.
No, it's
and
bullshit.
They have a dude manager that comes and takes all their photos and writes back all the texts. Hey, babe, thinking about you. Here's a picture you might like. Send me a tip. And it's a dude. Or I have a couple I'm friends with. They're a lesbian couple. The one is the sex worker model, and the other one is her partner. And her partner manages all those accounts. You're getting her wife, not her. Yeah. This is not
some
the
might
girl.
even pay extra for that.
Right. Well, depending on what they're interested in. But it's all fantasy. And if you know it's a fantasy and you know you're paying for a fantasy, and fantasies are really fun, I think that's awesome. But the problem is when people believe that it's real and feel disappointed that it's not, or they don't engage in healthy relationships because they are so involved in a fantasy world, and that can be quite destructive. So as long as you know it's a fantasy and you're being playful with your fantasy, cool.
Then sure.
And I'm all about these girls monetizing, being their own bosses. I think that's great, just depending on how they navigate that. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay, so in the world of Me Too, in Hollywood specifically, how has that, because you've been practicing for 7 years, and this whole Me Too thing has been public knowledge
right?
for
This is
2
happening
years.
since I've been doing my
2
job.
years. Has that affected your practice as a therapist?
I see, not now, but what was that, 3 years ago? Right when this really got to its peak, I saw female clients that would be really triggered by all the things going on in the news, that would want to talk about their sexual assaults, whether it was Me Too Hollywood related, or a job they had, or a trauma, or a rape. And it really was activating for a lot of people who were victims or had situations where they felt like were ambiguous. Wait, was I a victim?
Yeah.
How do I navigate that? Am I just feeling shame? Was I a victim? Should I do something about this thing that happened to me? I did see it mobilize women that were victims in the past to say, you know what, I'm going to finally take a stand. And I don't even care if this person's brought to justice or not. I'm going to maybe write them an email, or I'm going to contact an authority or contact a lawyer. So it was mobilizing, which is good.
Yeah.
And I also saw typically male identifying clients that either had done things they needed to process through, or were accused and hadn't done things. Or, I had a client I was working with that was polyamorous, very open polyamorous, very ethical, but because they saw a lot of people and the other people weren't familiar with the ethics behind polyamorous relationships, they felt wronged when he wouldn't be their boyfriend, or, things that are, maybe uncomfortable things about dating in an open relationship. And they, he was ganged up on Twitter and was very traumatized by this dynamic. So having clients that were able to mobilize and take action and feel empowered by what the support they got from that movement was really wonderful. And at the same time, there were situations where people were accosted or bullied online because of our online culture, which I think online culture just in general is a whole other that is a problem. So I saw a lot of it. Now I feel like it's made it just more acceptable to be more open when you feel like something's not right. I think that we have settled into maybe a more healthy space with it. Whereas before, I think that two extremes were happening. So I've seen a lot of people affected by it.
Polarized. That's interesting that you say that, because I haven't got to talk about that on the show. The news cycle being triggering for people in their personal lives, even if they don't have anything to do with it.
Right. I mean, I felt triggered or activated by that time too, and I would just reflect on, you know, what intimate situations in my life maybe have more of a power dynamic than I was aware of in the past, and it really made me more reflective in that moment. So I'm sure that was happening for a lot of people. But yeah, the news in general, whether it was Me Too related or not, can be really problematic. I've been talking to this with some clients lately. You know, back in the day, you used to read the newspaper once a week. And so let's say the fires in Australia, you might read this article, you would see a couple of photos, you would be touched by it, maybe you'd want to donate, you'd be aware, but it would be in maybe, let's say, the Sunday paper or on the evening news, and you would be affected by it, but then you would also still be able to engage in your life because you wouldn't be bombarded. Now, between Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and online news on your phone and notifications, you cannot escape the images of the things that are very upsetting in the world. It is a constant bombardment all the time, which requires you to then set boundaries on how you engage in like these digital messages about how terrible things are. And between Australia and the issue with Iran right now, I'm working with a lot of people that come in and they're overwhelmed with anxiety and overwhelmed with sadness about these two current events that are really scary, and you need to still get up and go to work.
Yeah.
You need to still engage with your partner.
Nobody has time. Yeah.
Right, and go to jobs and eat food and go to sleep at night. But it can be so overwhelming because there's so much information that's accessible and in your face. And if you're on your phone all day, it's very difficult to separate yourself from, you know, thousands of pictures of sad burned koalas. Like, it is heartbreaking. If you go down that wormhole, you're probably just going to sit in the corner and cry.
Yeah.
So how do we set those boundaries with still validating things that are upsetting in the world, understanding how we can support those things and be aware of those things and still be healthy individuals? So I think it's a new problem.
It's a new problem.
It's a new problem when I work with people that are, let's say, in their early or mid-20s. Mm-hmm. That's a life they've always known. They don't know different. But being like, I'm in my late 30s, so, you know, I grew up with all the digital technology, but it was really coming about as I was a young adult.
Yeah.
So, like, I can see the before and after and how that's really changed our culture.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think, in my early 30s, thinking about how, like, when we were kids, like, none of that stuff existed. And then as we got to be teenagers, we got to be, like, the first people to, like, use this and, like, set what the etiquette is for, like, that kind of a situation. And everybody else has to, you know, follow behind. But that dynamic in there of, like, knowing how to use that and knowing how to deal with all of that constant inundation of this person's in the news, that person's in the news, this tragedy, that tragedy, and it's all negative stuff, like constant.
When I look through even Apple News and I scroll down, I just feel gross. I feel like it's, you know, exploited, tragic event, burned koalas. Oh, by the way, dresses at award shows. I'm like, why are these two articles even next to each other? What is happening? You know, and then reality show people. It's like, I just don't want to look at this.
There's no rhyme or reason to any of this
I'll
chaos.
check in with what's going on because I need to know in the world. I also need to know for clients that come in that want to discuss things that are happening and how it might affect them. I also work with clients that could be in the news that, whether it's positive or negative, and I need to kind of just be aware of the world a little bit, but then I have to shut it off because I don't think it's healthy to constantly engage in that.
Yeah. No, definitely. And the thing is, like, most of it, you can't do anything about it.
No, you can't you have no control. I mean, well, ultimately you don't have control over most things in your life.
Yeah.
You can control how you can react and respond to personal or international cultural situations, but you can't change anything. You can only change how you engage with things.
How you feel about it.
So you can shut off the news. You can choose where and how you want to get news. You can choose how much or if you engage in Instagram, but you can't change anything else. So
you're just stuck with it.
Yeah. That's, you know, and we all want to have these illusions of control in the world that we engage in, but really we just have no control. My favorite book is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and he was a physician and he was in a concentration camp in the Holocaust, and he wrote a book about this experience and also how he's then realized that, you know, I couldn't control my situation. I didn't know my wife or my family were even alive. I'm in this work camp. I'm losing weight. I'm unhealthy. I thought I was going to die. And I could still then choose how I wanted to interact with the people around me, how I had feelings about hope and faith, how I reflected on love. So even in the most dire circumstance, you can still choose how you perceive the world around you and how you engage in the world around you, even if you have no control over what's happening to you.
Just get in your own zone. So now that Harvey, it's an interesting week for #MeToo because Harvey's been getting charged in New York and doing trials in New York. And as of yesterday, he got charged in LA. And it's like 100 women against Harvey Weinstein and like all of this situation. But I want to take it back to like the whole, when this first happened, he was like, I grew up in the 60s and 70s when you could do this stuff, basically, and it was okay. Have you been talking to like any men that have felt a certain type of way about how, oh, you can't do that anymore? It's like, nah, you weren't supposed to do that anyway. But
not really. The clients I see, I don't really have anybody that kind of falls into that, into a Harvey Weinstein category.
Well, I mean, not necessarily Harvey in general, but like, I feel like there's a lot of men that feel slighted these days. It's like, oh, well, you can't do that anymore.
I see it more online or friends. Usually when I talk to friends that are not in my professional world, you know, that will make comments like that. And I'll say, whoa, hold on.
Hang on a second.
Let's talk about that for a second. And, you know, I think that, you know, we see even with Joe Biden, like how he's just a little friendly and a little touchy and huggy, and that's just not something you can do anymore. And our culture has changed and we're more aware of these things. But I hear of men having that type of response, that just general confusion sometimes too. Like, wait, I can't do this anymore.
Everyone's very confused.
I can't slap my secretary on the butt. I mean, that's very old school. But, you know, the 50s and the 60s mentality. Yeah. And even though that was a product of the culture, you also have to understand when culture changes. Yeah. And what that means for you as an individual. So right now the culture has changed very rapidly and it's shifted and people are more aware, more woke.
Yeah.
I feel so hip.
Feel so hip.
But now that that's happened, you cannot behave that way. And maybe that was culturally acceptable at a point in time. Maybe it wasn't just you. Maybe you were going along with what was acceptable, but that is not the case now.
Anymore.
And, you know, Harvey Weinstein has really become the face of this phenomenon.
I call him the sacrificial lamb.
Really? Yeah. It's really interesting. Yes, he did things that were of poor judgment and bad ethics and of bad taste. And our culture rapidly shifted, and he is really the figure of this. And so, you know, I look at, I don't know, I'm not an optimist, but I do look at everything as an opportunity for individual growth and for cultural growth. And he's in a position where he really has an opportunity to turn things around for himself and for our culture and how he engages in his defense and his response to what's happening. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues to play out.
Yeah, because it's not going anywhere. Like, I would say over the past year, people have been asking me, like, when is this going to stop? When is this going to end? And it's like, it's not.
And there are people that are on his level of attention that have had, whether it's like a metoo or has done something in poor taste, and with the way our media is now, they jump all over this stuff.
Yeah.
And there have been people that have, you know, taken a step back, gotten out of the spotlight, taken some personal inventories and changed their behaviors. And, you know, that is possible. People can change. So I think we also have to be very careful on how we view people and how we vilify them to be terrible, bad people. We're all just people trying to figure out how to navigate life. There are exceptions when people are antisocial or personality disorder where they want to harm people and they don't have empathy, but that's a very small amount of the population. I don't believe Harvey Weinstein is an antisocial sociopath person.
No.
So we have to be careful.
He's done way too much hanging around.
You know, and that we really vilify people. So let's try to remember that when we want to talk badly about whether it's a celebrity that's being portrayed by the media or somebody we know and we don't like, that we're all people trying to navigate what this experience will be for us. So
totally. And like the media skews it the way that is going to get them clicks.
Yeah.
Like if they don't, which is a reason why this show was born, is because they put out these articles and like they would gloss over stuff or leave out major components or whatever the case may be. And like, no, hang on a second. Let's dial it back.
Right. Let's dial it back and really think about what's happening and what this means for all people involved and really reflect. Like I said, we don't control what's going on with Harvey Weinstein, but how does that affect us? Why are we interested in this? Why are you as a person interested in this situation, this culture? Is it triggering for you? Is it bringing something up from your own past? I mean, really, we are very self-involved individuals.
Absolutely.
We want to believe that we're so empathetic and we're altruistic, but really, you know, the Harvey Weinstein resonates so much with people, and especially with women and some men, because it reminds us of a power dynamic that maybe we didn't speak up about, or that we felt harmed by at some point. It's pushing on a soft spot for a lot of people, or men that were, you know, accused of something at some point. Well, hey, why'd that happen? So it's triggering for a lot of people, and that's why we're like so interested in it. Yeah.
And it's like it's a trigger machine. Like it just keeps feeding itself. Like my personal
and it's also it's a Hollywood story. It's a glamorous,
very sexed up,
and he's really unattractive. And imagine if he was really hot. It would be a different type of news story. So I think it's very
look at
easy.
the James Franco thing is kind of the same. Like you have pretty well the same thing on paper, but it's completely different.
Right. If Harvey Weinstein was a hot babe, I wonder how this would change things.
Yeah.
Or if the actresses or the people that he had been harmful to were not attractive, A-list, glamorous women.
Yeah, well, I mean, the article that came out in Teen Vogue this last week was kind of more about like Sarah Ann Massey, for example, who was interviewing to be his nanny. Like, not an A-list actress. It was not Cate Blanchett being sent to his hotel room by her agent William Morris. Who's
But it's still a vulnerable young woman.
Oh yeah.
And so we like these stories. We eat them up because it's the vulnerable woman and the villain male, and it's glamorous and it's Hollywood and it's, you know,
it's a story
salacious.
Just like every other that we
I'd like to
pump
believe
out of here.
that if it was a, you know, attractive woman and an unattractive male, and they weren't Hollywood people, that it would be the same level of circumstance or consequences. But unfortunately, I don't think that's our culture. And so I think that this is so salacious, and that's why it's being eaten up, and then ultimately becomes very triggering for people. But, you know, the dynamic of the age and the gender and all these considerations with this make it
all the demographics that
exciting for people.
Yeah,
too,
that come into play.
Yeah.
That I think like the machine, because there's different Me Too movements throughout the world. Like I just talked to Me Too Ethiopia yesterday, or like there's Me Too France, there's Me Too India, there's all these places. And when I was doing I did the Female Filmmaker Fuse Festival. We did like a Me Too panel or whatever, and everybody involved in these court cases felt like so downtrodden, how they weren't making a difference, and it was like ruining their lives to do this, and they weren't getting any, like, not saying not getting anything out of it, but like nothing's changing, like it's all just still the same. And it's like, no, wait a second, like if you look at like what it's sparked across the world,
there has been a shift, and this was definitely a cultural shift that went to an extreme and now has kind of settled to, hey, this just isn't right. Like these things just can't happen anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's not as loud maybe as it felt a few years ago, but there is definitely a cultural shift. And,
oh, for sure.
You know, whether it's, you know, writers' rooms wanting more women, having more female voices, having more females on set, men being aware of that and including more women so that these environments aren't happening as much, there is definitely a shift. And, you know, you see it to another extreme where they're almost like, I don't know, you look at something like Star Wars, where you have the new Star Wars movie, you wonder, would they have put this female in this role if the culture hasn't changed? That they wanted to kind of maybe capitalize on this culture.
Trend. Yeah.
And then if you look at something like The Mandalorian, which came out, I'm kind of geeky, and I'm not a big Star Wars person, but I do really like Mandalorian is an amazing show.
Beautiful show.
But it showed a woman that, yes, is attractive, but is a professional. I think she's an MMA fighter, and she says, there's a quote where she's like, I don't do babies. Like, she's not maternal, she's very strong, so it wasn't like a forced female role. But you see this dichotomy happening where there's more visibility of female roles being strong and not traditional in that sense that you've seen before, yet there's still like, well, let's just put a woman in this because that'll make it more marketable. So you see that too. So there's all these good and bad things that are happening with.
It's a time of experimentation,
right? Of what's going to work, and ultimately, as I said, I think the entertainment industry is absolutely exploiting the Me Too movement for profit and whatever.
Well, yeah,
but that happens
it's
with everything.
Headquartered at CAA for a reason. They were going to let this go by without getting in the game.
Yeah.
That would just be.
But ultimately, I think
Prouder
the culture has
monetization.
changed and still is changing and evolving, and we're seeing that in a lot of, whether it's news articles, our own lives, the way film and TV are presented. So, I think we're in a better space than we were a couple years ago, and how that's being managed and handled by the world.
But yeah.
But there's
Us as a
always going to
collective.
be a lot of work to do, and it's interesting how these like sensationalized shifts then settle and create a cultural change that has it echoing for decades after. I was watching a documentary last night about birth control being introduced in small villages in Africa, and how even though at the time it didn't really cause a big difference, you're looking at it 20 years ahead, and that villages that had birth control allowed women to seek more education, to have more freedom and flexibility, to not feel like they had to be stuck with one man. And overall, the culture, not just the women, couples were making more money, had better homes, their children had more education, and ultimately the women were living longer. So we didn't know that for 20 years. So I'm curious of how the Me Too movement explosion and then the settling of it and the progression of it will affect us in 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, maybe are women going to live longer? Who knows? We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know what the repercussion of a small change, or, ultimately it is a small change in the scheme of the world.
But the ripple
effect and what that will be. So I'm excited to watch and like kind of just listen and see how that plays out.
Observe and take notes in your therapist pad.
Yeah, I'm creepy like that. Just like watching, what's happening here? I'm watching it all. I'm paying attention. But it'll be exciting to see how it continues to progress.
I wonder if anybody is going to live longer. We'll see. I think the amount of justice getting sought.
Well, the more resources we have as people and as women, the healthier we can be.
Yeah.
So if we are constantly being traumatized or put in positions where we're disempowered, that's going to create higher cortisol in our bodies and stress hormones, and maybe people will be more likely to drink, smoke, use drugs, not care for themselves. So it sounds far-fetched to be like, we're going to live longer if there's this Me Too movement, Harvey Weinstein, but the ultimate effects of stress and empowerment or disempowerment
and survival
will affect your lifespan. Yeah. So yes, I think that, this ultimately it's not far-fetched to think something like that. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Especially if you can, especially work-wise and like supporting yourself, because we do live in a Western culture where everybody works. Mm-hmm. It's not just half the population. Mm-hmm. Everybody goes to work. Mm-hmm. Everybody. And you have to be able to support yourself in some way, shape, or form. And if you are inhibited by like, well, if I take that job, it's going to be like this, or I can't even get that job. There's no way. Like that power structure is not going to even allow for that. Then what? It's good for the economy, if anything.
Yeah. It's interesting to see what happens, though. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Yeah. No Filter Friday. We've been meaning to do this forever.
Yeah.
And we did it.
We did it.
Thanks for coming on. Oh, are you on like Instagram, or what's your practice name?
My practice is just my name, Dr. Amie Harwick. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a website, but it's like an online business card, so not very exciting, dramieharwick.com. And I'm on Instagram, Dr. Amie Harwick. Amie is AMIE, and I also have a YouTube that will have, periodically I put up like mental health videos on tips on managing stress and information about sexuality, so you can go down that wormhole anytime.
Can't have too many of those. Okay. All right, well that is enough No Filter Friday on Public House Media. I will see you all next week.